Many people might wonder why I'm writing this huge autobiography, one of the longest, in fact, as far as I know, the longest ever written in the English language. Is it just conceit? Is it just self-obsession? Well, I'm sure there's part of that in the answer, but here are some of the reasons I think that lie behind this set of autobiographical social histories that I'm writing, and which are available on my website, www.alanmacfarlane.com, and also on Amazon. There are various audiences, possible audiences or readerships. One, at the moment in the back of my mind, is a Chinese audience. These books may well be translated into Chinese because there is a great interest in China about British education, American education, how it works, what virtues there are in it, and many young Chinese are being sent to Western educational institutions. So I've been asked from time to time, and I'm working with educationists in China to explain how it works. And these volumes are a documented case study of the inner workings of this system of a kind that is not available anywhere else. There is not a single set of volumes or individual volume like this to explain to someone in China or India or anywhere else outside the UK how our educational system, admittedly a very partial view from the upper middle class in the 19th century or in the 20th century and so on, but how its essence works on us. And so one audience is Chinese parents and organisers and educationalists. A second audience is basically making a time capsule. In my professional work as a historian, I've edited and collected and published and made available in databases many sets of historical and also anthropological historical materials from around the world, including England. Very large sets of these about the past and about other countries. And it seems sensible to extend this and do it about oneself, which is what I'm doing in these autobiographies, and about my ancestors. And so my wife Sarah Harrison is editing a series of volumes on my family papers, which is the prologue to this autobiography. So it's archival, treasuring, saving, making available, related of course possibly to depositing my papers in an archive. A third possible audience or purpose are historians of the 20th century. As I wrote these accounts, I became aware that they are a very detailed account of the changes that occurred between my birth in 1941 and the end of this particular account in 1971 of a watershed. I mean, every period likes to think of itself as a watershed, but the 60s and 70s, the 50s still seem part of an earlier world, but the 60s and 70s seem to be the birth of a new sort of age. And the huge changes in technology, in communications, in living standards, in popular culture that are documented throughout these volumes are a minute but detailed counterpoint to broader surveys that have been done by people like David Kynaston of the changes after the Second World War. And as far as I know, there is no such work to count through a single life. Another possible audience are many people who have family documents. They've saved things either of their ancestors or themselves, and they're wondering what to do with them. And I was wondering what to do with them, and I've done something, and so this may be a useful model for others. I explain how I've done it and how recent technologies have made it easier to do so. So it may encourage, as I hope it will, others to treasure their own lives and their own collections, to work on them, think about them, write their autobiographies, publish them, which is now much more easily possible, and to save them, if they can, for the future. Another audience which relates to the Chinese side of things are educationists. Huge amounts of money are spent on the education of children, and most of them are spent by adults who no longer can really remember what it's like to be a child. And so many of the schemes are misguided and half-cocked. So this is an account which may be of interest both to psychologists of education and planners of education, as showing how exactly a child learns. There is no other account, as far as I know, of how the mind and spirit of a child, day by day, month by month, develops from one life. And so you can actually see the change in logic, the change in memory, the change in style, the change in the heart and mind of a child, growing from infancy through to middling adulthood, i.e. 30. And a final obvious audience is myself. We understand ourselves through our own past. When John Stuart Mill was asked about how we really understand the world, he said basically through history, general history, looking at what has happened in the past and in the life of nations and so on, and also examining our own psychology. Well, what better way to examine our own psychology than to try to analyze exactly our emotional, psychological, mental development. Of course, many people don't really have a possibility of doing this because they haven't kept this material, or they're not interested, or they're frightened of their own pasts. I was actually a little apprehensive, I must say. Most of us have thought that in the past there must be some pretty murky skeletons hanging around, and as I gingerly started this, I thought I was going to come across something awful, either about myself or people I had hitherto loved. But it's been a very therapeutic process. Some people might say it's psychotherapy on the cheap, which I suppose it is. But I've learned a huge about myself, and this helps me think more clearly and to understand the world I live in through my own understanding of one human being. So those are just some of the reasons why I've written this account, and of course for my grandchildren and family as well.